In 2014, when Devendra Fadnavis was asked if the BJP would make him Chief Minister of Maharashtra, he said the High Command will decide. 5 years later, his election pitch has been, I will be back as Chief Minister. How did the first of the BJP's Central Command appointee Chief Ministers become the undisputed leader of what was the most Congress state in India? To chart that journey, I have with me Nistula Hebbar, political editor at The Hindu, and senior political journalist Anosh Malekar. In the last fortnight, both have done really insightful profile pieces on Fadnavis that you should read when you get the time. Anosh, how did Fadnavis grow out of the High Command appointee image as most BJP chief ministers have been since 2014?
I think Fadnavis has proved himself a very smart and intelligent chief minister. He does not take on somebody in public. Instead, he has worked the back rooms, has worked behind the scenes to deal with his rivals. This has helped him keep a clean image as well as, deal successfully with all the challenges that have come with his way. Even if you look at the way he has dealt with the Shiv Sena, the big brother in Maharashtra, he has outsmarted them. At the same time, he has kept the Sena chief Uddhav Thackeray in good humor. I think this has been his plus point. This has really helped him consolidate his position and take charge of Maharashtra affairs all by himself.
Nistula, you've written on how he's consolidated power within the state BJP unit. After warding off that initial attempt in October 2014 by Gadkari supporters to push his case, how did Fadnavis manage to keep in check Eknath Khadse, Sudhir Mungantiwar, Pankaja Munde and a number of other leaders?
Well, he was helped along by the fact that his own personal manner and his political acumen in terms of dealing with challenges has been very acute. He is a Brahmin chief minister in a Maratha-dominated state. A Brahmin chief minister, that too he completed 5 years, the only chief minister of the state after Vasant Naik to have done so. It's a credit to his, political chops, as they say. All the names that you have mentioned, one after the other, Mr. Khadse had got into a controversy, Ms. Munde had got into a controversy in the past, and even Prakash Mehta and other senior leaders, some controversy or the other, except that Mr. Devendra Fadnavis rose above all of them and managed to create a first among equals or a bigger leader than them kind of an image for himself. He managed the two big, political challenges, as I wrote. One was the Maratha reservation issue. That could have gotten extremely ugly, and it could have made life very difficult for a BJP government to survive there. And especially a Brahmin chief minister, but he handled that as well as he could without any major outbreak of any violence or bitterness or anything. And the second was the farmers' long march and the rural distress. He managed to dissipate some of that anger and angst and channeled it outside of the capital, where it could have gotten extremely serious. So all of these skills, the High Command kind of saw that he had these skills to establish a long-lasting government and also create conditions for being voted back. And please remember that through these 5 years, BJP has swept almost every local body poll. Now, local body polls in Maharashtra are extremely important. Many of these local bodies are rich. Most of them are completely clued into, have to do with grassroots level support, etc. And therefore, he managed to draw support for himself as an individual candidate who is occupying the chief minister's chair, something that hasn't been done in the past. Except perhaps by these really big Maratha strongmen like, Sharad Pawar or Vilas Rao Deshmukh.
To take that point forward on what you've written, Anosh, specifically on the shift that's underway in Paschim Maharashtra and in Marathwada, is some of that got to do with local elections or local elections to elected bodies? The second part of it is elections to cooperatives, be those sugar cooperatives, be those banks, and ways in which power has traditionally been controlled in Maharashtra. Is the BJP's march into that largely responsible for being able to eat into the territories that the Congress and the NCP were strong in?
especially if you look at Western Maharashtra, the Congress and NCP had started disintegrating right from the mid 1990s, when the first Shiv Sena BJP government came into power. That was the time we had almost a dozen very senior congressmen shifting allegiance to the Shiv Sena BJP government, and people like Harshvardhan Patil from Indapur, who has recently joined the BJP. He led the rebels, they were called the rebels at that point of time. So this is not new. But what is new now is the total disintegration of the Congress NCP base among the Marathas. And this has happened since the 1999 break by Sharad Pawar from the Congress. And of course, it has right now the whole incoming, as the BJP Shiv Sena calls it, especially Mr. Fadnavis refers to it as incoming in his public utterances, is largely, I think, due to the scams, especially the Maharashtra Cooperative Bank scam that has come out in a big way recently. And as Mr. Pawar has alleged, that there is a lot of threat looming over the lot of these chieftains, as we call them, Maratha chieftains or otherwise. I think it has got a lot to do with that. And also, anybody who knows a bit of the history of Maratha polity or Maharashtra's politics won't be surprised with what is happening, because, historically, these local chieftains are known to shift allegiance between powers. This is to protect their backyards and help them continue their hold over their districts or taluka jagirs, And this, I think, is actually, I believe this is just the beginning.
Okay.
Fadnavis would have a lot of groundwork to do on them, because these people are known to switch back, switch on and switch off at the drop of a hat.
I'll come back to some of those dynamics in just a bit, Anosh. Back to the point Nistula was making. So while, and I go back to that point of 2017, 18, 19, when there were caste-related protests and there was rural distress, and this wasn't the only state. So I'm just going to compare what happened at that time. While Prime Minister Modi remained relatively untouched by these issues in his popularity, so it seemed by the 2019 mandate, in other incumbent BJP chief ministers bore the brunt for that rural distress and that caste-based protest. Tally fell in Gujarat for the BJP. They lost the 3 states in December 2018 across central India. How has Fadnavis kept all of that at bay?
I think it's too early. Because
sorry, the question was to Nistula, Anosh.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Now you have to remember, Kaushik, that these 3 states that the BJP lost in 2018, there were long-term anti-incumbency issues as well. There were 15-year-old governments that got voted out. And except for Chhattisgarh, I would say that both in Rajasthan and in Rajasthan, of course, there is an alternation of government. But in Madhya Pradesh, it was a 15-year anti-incumbency. But in both these states, the margin of victory was not very high. It was a majority sure, and this, in some cases, the majority had to be shored up later by winning over the BSP MLAs or independents, etc. And in Madhya Pradesh, for quite a while, the counting could have gone either way. So rural distress as an issue that attaches itself specifically to the BJP, I really wouldn't make a huge case for that, simply because Prime Minister Modi, continues to be extremely popular and remains kind of like Teflon coated on this issue. The case with Devendra Fadnavis was that these are all sociologically long-term issues. The Maratha agitation. A lot of people, people were drawing parallels between the Patidar Andolan and the Maratha agitation. But the Maratha agitation never turned violent. It was better politically managed, and there were talks, and finally they did get something out of it. And the government showed that it was sincere in terms of addressing some of the issues that the Maratha community had raised. The Maratha community itself felt extremely disenfranchised due to also the fact that agriculture has become less and less remunerative. So there are long-term causes for these things, and Devendra Fadnavis is the only person to blame for the situation that the Marathas found themselves did not quite stick. There were a lot of attempts to show that he was a Brahmin chief minister in a Maratha-dominated state, but it didn't stick to him, and that was largely due to the fact that he politically managed these things very cleverly. If you see, after the death of Gopinath Munde, there were other claimants to that position, and but Prime Minister Modi and Mr. Shah decided that Maharashtra would be one in a series of the states where they would break the hegemony of the dominant caste and create and put somebody from a smaller community into the chief minister's chair. They did that with Manohar Lal Khattar. They did put a non-tribal in Jharkhand with Mr. Raghubar Das, and they did with Mr. Fadnavis. And in all three cases, the High Command has actually backed them to the hilt. That is a big sort of plus point also in Devendra Fadnavis' favor. If you remember, in Haryana, we had really gruesome riots, that Jat agitation, that followed the Jat agitation. But even then, there was no question of Mr. Khattar being removed and somebody else being put in his place.
I'll get to the Delhi consequences of this in just a bit. Coming back to Anosh, trying to sense another shift. The fact that Mr. Fadnavis is chief minister, you have the finance minister, Mr. Mungantiwar, as a senior leader. Mr. Khatse from another part of the state has been sidelined. Mr. Gadkari is among the senior-most members of the union cabinet. This shift of power in the state away from Paschim Maharashtra, away from Marathwada towards Vidarbha, where does that leave leaders from other parts of the state? Will they have to reconcile with that, or will there be a push and pull that you see into trying to counterbalance that in the coming years?
I see at the moment they'll have to reconcile to this because you don't find any leader of the stature of Gadkari or Fadnavis in Western Maharashtra. Of course, we are not talking Sharad Pawar here, because he's much senior to all of them. And I think his stakes now in the state, so far as, occupying the chief minister's post are nil. So I think right now in Western Maharashtra, they have to reconcile. And there is going to be a big push from Vidarbha, because I was in Vidarbha for a few days last month. And they have a whole crop of leaders there, nurtured for a long time by the Sangh and the BJP, which hasn't happened in Western Maharashtra. And so far as the other areas, North Gujarat, if you see, Khadse has lost ground. We can say that for sure now, after he was denied ticket for the assembly election a few days back. And I think he has to reconcile to his position being weakened within the party. And Marathwada too doesn't have a huge leader except Pankaja Munde. And recently you saw Amit Shah coming here and addressing a huge gathering along with Pankaja. But I think Pankaja would have to wait in the wings for some more time till, Fadnavis is either, taken to Delhi or, has some other plans.
One
for him, the party
sub-question.
high command.
Yeah, so one sub-question out of that, because as a consequence of this power that comes from Vidarbha to the state government, as a result of that, does the region now feel it is politically represented adequately enough to be able to not make a demand for a separate state anymore? Has the consequence of a Vidarbha strong BJP-led state government in Maharashtra meant that previous demands for a separate statehood is now completely in the cold storage?
It looks like that.
Right.
And when I was in Nagpur, this issue was being discussed right from the streets to the political circles to bureaucratic circles, and everyone feels now the issue of a separate Vidarbha has to take backseat till Fadnavis remains the chief minister. And as you know, Mr. Fadnavis has said that he is, as the chief minister, he is the leader of Maharashtra. And so the question of, breaking or asking for a separate state doesn't arise. So, yes, I totally agree with you. As long as Mr. Fadnavis is in the saddle, this issue of separate Vidarbha would remain in cold storage.
Nistula, do you see a second round of leaders being taken to the center happen as did in November 2015 when Mr. Parrikar then moved from chief minister to the defense minister's post in Delhi? Will there come a point in the second Modi administration where for executive experience those that are running states are taken into the union government, or that is something that Mr. Modi doesn't think he needs anymore, that administrative skills have been picked up by those around him in the last 6 years and doesn't need to import them from the states anymore?
No. I'm sure there's going to be some reshuffles going forward.
Okay.
And I think a lot of the senior leaders are also positioning themselves for a role in Delhi. Several want it quite eagerly because this is Mr. Modi's second term, and a lot of people are also looking at, say, a post-Modi situation where they could also be players. I don't think anything is quite as settled as everybody thinks, and the political chess moves are extremely interesting to watch. Now, a lot of people kept saying that this election in Maharashtra and Haryana are quite uninteresting because the outcome is a foregone conclusion. My simple point is that the outcome may or may not be a foregone conclusion, but long-term political trends are extremely interesting going forward from this election. Mr. Fadnavis was one of the major people who saved the BJP-Shiv Sena alliance for the assembly, because he did put a very strong case forward that since it had been promised during the Lok Sabha election, during the alliance talk, that they're going to go in together for assembly elections, that he has to keep his word. Secondly, the election is more or less BJP versus Sena, because both of them are trying to compete and get as many seats as possible. And it is a fight for Sena's relevance as well, in its place within the Mahayuti. If you have seen the kind of rebel candidates, etc., who have been put up against each other, all of this is manifestly clear. The survival of NCP in the Congress as well is at stake. Let me tell you that I saw very few posters and campaign equipment out on the streets in Mumbai when I was there on behalf of the opposition. They could also be saving money to kind of fight another day. For BJP, the ascendance of Mr. Fadnavis is a generational shift. BJP is always extremely tense about generational shifts. They always look towards the next, they're gaming for the next sort of set of leaders and things like that. And for BJP, it's extremely significant that Mr. Fadnavis, if he wins a second term, he will emerge stronger than ever within Maharashtra, and his ascendance in the state will be complete.
Okay. To get the sense of that generational shift, Anosh, when you were in conversation with people in Nagpur, is there that sense as well that the generation of Mr. Mahajan, Mr. Munde, to an extent slightly then to junior to them, Mr. Gadkari, is passing, and the person that enjoys the blessings of the Sangh High Command in Nagpur right now is the man in the seat right now, and then from there, who next?
There have been some interesting developments around.
All right, we'll just get back to Anosh when we reconnect that line. Sorry, I'll take that question to you again, Nistula, because you said on Delhi's, and I'm going to say that on the central point because I noticed some very interesting words. You said, I don't think it's a settled matter yet. Who next after the incumbent Prime Minister? What makes you say that?
Well, as I said, the BJP is always extremely tense, and especially the RSS on who after this one, who after that one. If you remember, during Vajpayee Advani era as well, there were always questions about who is the successor, who is this, who is that. They really don't believe, and they had a pretty tough time between 2004 to 2012 till Mr. Modi kind of emerged and seized that position for himself. It was a bit of a bloodbath. And they've always been extremely tense about that kind of a situation. They have candidates. They have a set of chief ministers who have administrative experience and popularity. And therefore, which way these games will go, and these are political moves, will be extremely interesting to watch post, in the next 5 years unfolding, because you have claimants galore, and you will have to make a choice at some point of time.
All right. At what point does the fact that you accumulate a lot of leaders from a lot of parties, some of which then become claimants in their own rights because of the stature they think they enjoy, is where you're unable to then sift through and say, here's what is binding these leaders together to be in one party. My question is, does there come a point when a large near single party apparatus is unable to remain as nimble, as deft, and starts getting into the trouble like the Congress did through the 70s, the 80s, into the shape it got into in the 90s when it started collapsing in state after state across India?
Well, you forget that there is something called the RSS, right, of which the BJP is a political outfit of. And even during the succession bits that you saw between 2004 and 2012, they did interfere quite decisively on several occasions. When Mr. Rajnath Singh became party chief in 2006, when Mr. Gadkari took over in 2009, when Mr. Rajnath Singh got another term in 2012, these were all decisive interventions by the RSS. So the thinking there is a little different. They have more than 30 affiliated organizations permeating every part of Indian civil society. And the feedback that they get, and other things, so they will have of course a very, very big say. In the case of Mr. Modi, there was a huge pressure from the below, from the cadre and from the people, that he be the chosen one as a prime ministerial face. He got it on his merits, and the feeling is that if things go a certain way, then the succession plan can be put in place.
On that note, that the fact on the 24th of October, 3 places to watch are Nagpur, Mumbai and Delhi, to say which way this moves, the results in Maharashtra, the consequences of that on the central setup in Delhi and the larger Sangh architecture. On that note, Nistula Hebbar, thank you very much for joining us. We lost them all. Halfway through, we'll get you more on this. Haryana is also going to the elections on the 21st, results on the 24th. So through the course of the next few days, keep watching BloombergQuint for the latest in the first assembly elections being held after Prime Minister Modi's re-election in May. Thank you for watching.